Unmute, start video. Okay, we're good.
Okay, great.
So we're ready to go, hey?
Ready whenever you are.
Hey, you want to call it, what should I call it?
Yeah, I like to start on time if we can, and then that means everybody can go. I know everybody's evenings are special these days, so.
Craig, it's too late to
Okay.
start on time.
Oh, it's 6:01 or something?
I give it the Zoom 5-minute. Everybody's orienting themselves on
Yeah,
I know. Well, that's
I
fair.
agree.
Yeah.
Well, how many people do we have on?
time. 30.
How
or
many
so.
people?
Sorry, I'm trying to count.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for being on the call today and in our meeting. We're going to listen to some really exciting information on 25Connects. We've done a lot of work since our last public meeting. I hope a lot of you have been engaged in some forms of engagement, a walk, a survey, a stakeholders meeting, or some other type of interaction. We want to really connect to the community because that's what 25 does. And I'm going to let our team, I think a lot of you know Craig from Stantec and David from Stantec, and leave the presentation to you. We will have some interaction. We will ask you questions, and we'll try to get through this as quickly as we can, but we really want to engage with you and hear what you have to think about 25Connects. So Craig, take it away.
Great. Thank you. And thank you everybody for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. We have been doing a lot of work between the first time we met and today. I'm really just trying to get a lot of information. So the stuff that you're going to see tonight is really about kind of our first thoughts, what we're hearing, and then there's going to be some call to actions afterwards. I just want to pause here for a minute if you've been part of our Zoom calls before, that we are asking you to please mute your microphone. If you do have any questions during our presentation, please use the chat box. There is a couple of live polling tonight, so we want you to pay attention for that and really interact with that. And if you have any questions in particular concerning the project, feel free to ask at the end, or just put it in the chat box. We'll answer as we go along. I do want to note that we are committed to a bilingual process here. We do have a Spanish version of this presentation available for tonight, but we heard back from the last time that there was just a little bit too much text on the presentation. So while we are unilanguage in this format, we do have resources available for you. Roberta is also on the phone. Roberta, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone, Roberta Duarte. So again, if you have any questions, si tienen una pregunta en inglés, en español, I'm here to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a little orient you tonight for our agenda. We're just going to do just a quick round of introductions of our team and who we are. You only met a few of us last time, so I just want to spend a little bit of time introducing the broader team. We'll talk a little bit about why we're here, what we heard, and then into the meat of the project. We have our three major components: the market analysis, the zoning study, and the BRT study. And then we're going to talk a little bit about next steps and our call to action from between now and our next session, and be able to answer any questions that you may have. I just want to orient. Again, my name is Craig Sklenart. I'm the project manager. We have on the phone tonight David Dixon, who's our principal on this project. We do have helping with the BRT, Ralph Denisco, and the market analysis, Drew Leff and Brett Sherman. We do mention Rhonda Belt. She is part of the team. She's been helping with the BRT piece, but unfortunately could not attend tonight's meeting. David Jerka, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is David Jerka, and I lead a company called Seventh Hill. We're an urban design and community engagement firm, and I'm really excited to have a few additional people on our team, including Roberta, who will introduce herself in a second, and Jacinda, and I believe Jacinda will introduce herself. And we also have two community leaders on the project, Diane Howard and Sonia Matis. Roberta, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi again, Roberto Duarte. I'm helping with the engagement team, leading the ethnographic research. I have a background in global and public health. So a lot of this work, we're really looking into a healthy community perspective, and just happy to be here. And I'll pass it along to Jacinda.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jacinda Walker. I've been fortunate enough to work on this project with David and the rest of the Santec team. I'm responsible for creating the brand, looking at the development and coordinating the visual communication components, as well as helping with any of the other graphic needs on today's presentation, as well as our social media graphics. And I'm looking forward to continuing working with everybody.
Thanks. Diane, would you like to introduce yourself? You can hear, see your own. Maybe we'll go forward to Sonia.
Oh, Sonia, you're on mute.
Just muted. There you go.
Yes, I just realized that.
No
I
worries.
saw my mouth going and I couldn't hear myself. Hello, my name is Sonia Monroy Matis, and I'm happy to be here and happy to be part of this team. And so I'm part of the community engagement team, and just being out, trying to get community involved and helping with surveys, helping the Hispanic Latino community, trying to understand what this project is about and how they will benefit with it by just being part of it and just being knowledgeable about it. So just very happy to be part of this and hopefully getting to know all of you a little bit better.
Great. David, do you want to talk a little bit about why we're here tonight? David Dixon, sorry.
Unmute. Okay, thank you. Now I'll be very brief. It's terrific that many of you have found your way through Zoom into this meeting in our virtual world here. I'm going to talk a little bit more later about how COVID has or has not changed what this project is all about, the future of these neighborhoods, the role that this terrific project will play in these neighborhoods and in the city of Cleveland. But I want to say right now that one reason it's so important for all of us to be here is that over the next couple of decades, Cleveland's urban neighborhoods, diverse, terrific urban neighborhoods downtown will be more important for the future of your city, of your region, than probably at any time in history. And projects like this are really going to be instrumental in connecting people to jobs and to each other in ways that will really matter as we move into the next era of our economy and as our demographics continue to change.
Great. With that, David Jerka, we've done a lot of engagement. I really appreciate everybody that's come out over the summer. And David's going to give a little bit of a breakdown of what we heard and what we're learning from that engagement process.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. So as you can see on the screen here, this is an overview of the various channels of work that our full team is working on. It includes market analysis, community engagement, which our team is leading. There's also transportation, transit-oriented development planning, financial planning, all working towards finalizing all these recommendations, weaving them together in January 2021. Today is marked here, so we're kind of at the midpoint overall, but we're really just kicking off the second phase of engagement. So what I'll go through next is a more detailed look at what that engagement looked like. Go to the next slide, thanks. So we started off in yellow, that's phase one. We did a lot of existing conditions analysis, looked at the demographics of the community, and used that demographic and ethnographic data to identify goals for engagement throughout the process. I'll show you a little bit more about where we're at in terms of that community engagement in a minute. We also had user experience walks. We did several things in addition to the virtual activities, in addition to the online activities. We were able to do a bunch of things on the ground, in person, in smaller groups of people of 12 or less. And as you can see here with today marked at the beginning of October, we're just getting started into the second phase of engagement. So we're pretty excited about what the second phase includes. So we can take a deeper dive into the feedback and ideas that you all have to make a better corridor. And again, we'll wrap up with the final public event in February. Next. So here's a snapshot of where we're at. Actually, this is where we were at a few weeks ago, so it's a little bit out of date, but basically on the left-hand side, you can see the project goals that we established at the beginning of the project. We know that there's about 44,000 people that live within our project area, so we wanted to produce about 5% of that number in printed materials, things that we can distribute. So our goal is to hit about 2,200 items to distribute by the end of the process, and we're halfway there right now, so we're on track, which is good. We wanted to hold at least 7 events for each of the 3 phases for a total of 21, and we're at 14 right now, so we're like 2/3 of the way to that goal. The third one's pretty important. We wanted to engage at least 1% of the entire corridor as active participants. So that's a goal of 440 people that either have taken a survey, have taken 10 minutes at least to fill out a survey, or participated in a user experience walk, come to one of our mobile tours, or participated in a one-on-one interview. So again, with that number, we're at a total of about 316 right now across the different forms of participation, which is good. And then lastly, impressions. So this is if we look at those 44,000 people overall, we want to hit that number in terms of impressions. So people that have seen something about the project, they've heard of it, and then they can choose whether they want to contribute or not. But we're about halfway there to that goal too. So we feel like between now and February, we're likely to hit those goals. Okay, next slide. So that's one way to look at it, like quantitative, but who are the people that are participating? That's also important. As you can see in some of these graphics, I'll explain them. The darker color on the left, if you look at race and ethnicity in the top left corner, the darker blue is the percentage of participants, people that have taken the surveys, that are white. And then to the right is the lighter color blue, which is the percentage of people that are white that live within the corridor. So that's kind of how these different graphics are set up. So we can see that 45% of the participants in the surveys were white, but the total number is 65% within the corridor. 26% of the people that took the survey were Black or African American, and 16% are Black or African American within the corridor. And then likewise, we have more than 4% above the Hispanic or Latinx percentage of residents that have participated. Another way of looking at some of this data is in terms of Spanish language. So we're right at the number, about 21% of the participants that speak Spanish and have taken the survey in Spanish, for example. In terms of gender, we're actually like 1% more female than the actual corridor. And then on the bottom, we also asked people questions about what type of mobility they've used in a typical week before COVID-19 quarantine. So of course, most people walk, but we also have about 60% of the participants that took the bus, which is good to know that most of the people that are participating are bus riders, and then 40% are cyclists. And then to the right, we have a pretty good age distribution. As we'd expect, the people on the ends of 65 to 74, the oldest, and the youngest under 18 are the lowest percentage. And then that kind of bell curve represents the rest of the neighborhood, which is good. So we're going to continue with some additional engagement to probably increase the number of people in that younger age demographic as the project goes on, but I think we're on good track. Next. Here's what some of these engagement activities look like. These are photographs from the 5 mobile tours that we conducted in this first phase of work. The first one was a walk from Clark to MetroHealth. Then a second segment in Ohio City. Number 3 was from Brooklyn Center to Old Brooklyn. Number 4 was pretty interesting because it was in partnership with Maximum Accessible Housing of Ohio. So we had 10 participants in that walk, most of whom required the use of a wheelchair or were legally blind. So we got some really great feedback from them in terms of like specific improvements that are required to make them feel more comfortable and improve accessibility along the corridor. And then the last one was a bike tour that we conducted along that full 3.5 miles of the corridor. Next. In terms of survey data, here is some of the high-level insights that we gathered. We won't go through everything right now, but essentially with that first question about what's most important to people, number 1 was neighborhood equity opportunities. So this is opportunities to live, work, and play in the corridor, in the neighborhood. Number 2 is the bus station locations, and then number 3, the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. Question 2 was about the biggest opportunities with the 25Connects project. And we heard number 1, there's this kind of close grouping of improved bus service, which was number 1. So that involves a lot of things, making the BRT faster, more reliable, more buses, more hours, so forth. Number 2 is making better connections between the different mobility options. Number 3 is housing choices that include affordability and variety. And then job creation, new businesses, and improving accessibility. Next. The third question was, what are the biggest risks? So what are people most worried about? And there's a big gap here between the number 1 and the number 2, as you can see. So number 1 concern was loss of affordability. So this includes rental and home prices. So in the later part of the presentation, you'll hear a little bit more about the potential responses to that within the project. Number 4, what elements should be included at every bus station? We heard that the top response was a bus shelter. People want a bus shelter at each of the locations, then seating, then digital signs with next bus arrival information. Okay, next. So here's a summary of the feedback in 4 different categories. One category is this bucket of transit. So we heard the biggest opportunities for the project are improved bus service and better connections between mobility options. Another thing we heard was that the top amenities for each BRT station are the bus shelters, seating, and digital signs with arrival information. Number 3, additional outreach to the Spanish-speaking community is needed in order to build awareness and increase ridership. This is something that was really underscored in Roberta's ethnographic research and individual interviews with folks along the corridor. Number 4, the MetroHealth line has a really strong visual brand. It's recognizable, which is great, but the name of the BRT is not universal. Different people call it different things. Number 5, the traffic speeds are a key concern for pedestrians along most of the corridor. And then lastly, need for more lighting along the corridor, and maybe the bus shelters could provide some of those well-lit safe spots. Next. In terms of economic development, again, you'll hear more about this a little later. So really quickly, some of the top concerns are the loss of affordability in local businesses and loss of cultural diversity. Number 2, the local businesses are eager to connect to MetroHealth, and there's a desire to expand different business presence along West 25th Street, which is also a great sign that we're seeing that. Longtime and new residents both are concerned that these visible improvements of improving the BRT might drive a neighborhood displacement. So again, through some of the financial and real estate mechanisms that we talk about later, hopefully that can be addressed. Next, there's a need to build mixed-use housing for both low-income residents who need transit and to attract renters who want TOD that are still maybe at a market rate, but attracting the folks who want to move there for the benefits of transit. And then lastly, vacant storefronts along many of the segments are unattractive and create a negative perception. Next. So in use and built form, so what the buildings look like and the scale, we think there's a real opportunity to think about the connection between the bus stops and the adjacent retail. There's ways that some of the convenience stores, maybe the parking lots could be designed in such a way that there's a stronger relationship between the two. The poor condition and narrow width of some of the sidewalks are barriers to equitable mobility. That came out loud and clear through that ADA and walking tour that I showed you. One of the three opportunities for the project, one of the top three opportunities for the project is the creation of more housing choices. Number 4, winter weather conditions. Although we haven't seen them yet, people that we talk to are already thinking about that. And it's really important that we think through ways to address the snow, ice, and some of the real negative impacts of lack of snow removal, particularly for seniors and people with mobility challenges. Number 5, the idea that the bridges actually create barriers more so than links or connections or gateways between the neighborhoods, and ought to be addressed. Number 6, even though things might be permanent that seem good, the reality is that there's a lot of temporary obstructions, and construction is almost a constant, and they oftentimes create unsafe conditions for people with limited mobility. And then lastly, we heard that public art is often recognized as the location's best quality. If there's public art there, people often noted that as one of the best visual qualities of that place. And then this lastly, there was a lot of interest and appreciation for some of the new multi-use trails located nearby the corridor, and they're perceived as valuable. But it's also clear that more outreach activities and maybe programming is needed to increase the equitable use of these facilities. Number 2, there's a very strong desire for more shade trees along much of the corridor, and better designed small public spaces for people to people watch and just live that urban lifestyle. Next, even though there's a few existing parks along West 25th Street, including like Market Square Park, there's still significant safety and maintenance challenges with them. So if any new parks are proposed, that maintenance plan definitely needs to be embedded from the beginning. And then lastly, a need for more digital audible crosswalks and different crossing indicators for people that are visually impaired, as well as wider sidewalks. So for example, a wheelchair and a stroller can pass by each other, which currently isn't the case, surprisingly, in a few locations along the corridor. All right, so that was kind of a whirlwind presentation. Hopefully you can digest more of it if you look at the slides, which we'll post on the website.
Thanks, David. Really appreciate that synopsis. We're going to move into sort of our initial findings on our 3 major tasks. The first is going to be the market analysis component. I'm going to introduce Drew and Brett, and David Dixon will pipe in here a little bit as well. So, team.
Great. This is Brett. Thanks, Craig. And I've been working with my colleague Drew Leff on the market analysis component of this. And just a kind of a quick note on what we were doing and what a market analysis is, perhaps just real quickly. Very different than a market study. The RTA had commissioned a couple more fulsome market studies in years past, most recent of which is July 2018. Our analysis is really an update to those, looking at market dynamics, supply and demand drivers in the neighborhoods that 25Connects touches, and updating some of those findings from those studies to influence and inform the RTA and of course the other work streams that the colleagues here at 7th Hill and Stantec are working on. Just a note about how we organized our thinking. No doubt, people who live in these communities might take might dispute being grouped together with them, but just for discussions purposes and for analytical purposes, we have kind of grouped Ohio City and Tremont together. A lot of what's driving developers and real estate development opportunities in those 2 neighborhoods are very similar, at least for analytical purposes. So Ohio City and Tremont, we've looked at as kind of one statistical neighborhood. Moving south from there, Clark, Fulton, and Brooklyn Center, a lot of similarities from supply and demand dynamic. And then lastly, kind of the end of the line or near the end of the line in Old Brooklyn, an interesting neighborhood that has its own unique attributes demographically as well as from a real estate standpoint. So that's how we've kind of organized our analysis, and we'll be kind of sharing some of those findings. Next, please. Thanks, Greg. We couldn't have done what we did without the support and engagement from many people in in these neighborhoods, just a list of which are here. Many thanks to them, hopefully some of whom are on the call here. So we've touched base with what we hope is a broad enough group of developers, lenders, owners, operators, community development corporations to understand what is happening now, who is looking at these neighborhoods for development or for redevelopment, who's living here, who is growing here, who is educating here. So many thanks to the people that helped us do our job. Thank you. You can move forward, Craig. David, are you going to hop on this one, or I'm happy? You're on mute though, David.
I am actually going to literally jump on it. How's that? Thanks, Brett. I want to sort of just pause here. We want to pause here and just talk about the impact that COVID-19, that this worldwide pandemic is having on Cleveland, on these neighborhoods. What has it changed, and also what has it not changed from, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago? These observations will say a lot about the fundamental strengths that this corridor has. So first of all, if you look at the Cleveland region writ large, the entire region, while population projections call for probably about the same population you got now, 10, 20 years from now, there are fundamental changes, demographic changes going on in who that population is. So basically, there will be a significant increase in the number of households without kids. Households without kids strongly prefer living in walkable, amenitized, historic, if that's possible, sort of community-rich neighborhoods and downtown. We probably have, as a country, the strongest urban neighborhood downtown housing market we have had, certainly in my probably overly long professional life here, and we've got 20 years of it. We also have an aging population, and folks who turn 65 or thereabouts about 3 out of 4 times decide to depart their suburban single family house and find something that is probably multifamily, often in a walkable environment, and potentially the very same neighborhoods that all these households, other households without kids, are looking for, which could be the terrific neighborhoods along this corridor. Now, that doesn't mean that these changes have to happen, but it's really important to understand how much stronger, despite the memes about folks leaving cities that have come up around COVID, how much stronger, how much more appealing these neighborhoods will be, because this is a tool we can work with in order to drive the kinds of changes that you want. And we obviously have to work very hard to make sure that they don't also produce gentrification and displacement, which can happen if we aren't conscious of it and doing the things to ensure that folks can stay in their neighborhoods. At the same time, you probably all heard a lot about many of you were probably like me working from home. We've sort of collectively discovered the joys or lack thereof of working virtually. That has very much changed workplaces. What's very interesting, we've been discovering from talking to our clients, is that the industries that are creating the most jobs, innovation industries, knowledge industries, are the ones most interested in having their employees in place, because the innovation productivity is much higher. We're working with a whole group of innovation employers who basically said, in many ways, working remotely has been just fine, but literally the innovation that is their lifeblood is not happening at the same rate. They need folks running into each other, having conversations. So while some jobs are leaving cities, there have been a number of articles pointing out that recently that innovation and knowledge industries are coming into cities, even during COVID. Whether they'll come to this corridor, I don't know. Downtown's probably the first choice, but maybe the traditional kinds of jobs you might have looked for might not be coming, other jobs might be. And then we come to retail, and I think COVID has been a particular particularly tragic impact on a lot of terrific small businesses and retailers who've had a very hard time holding on. COVID has accelerated a trend that has basically been resulted in lots of malls and big box stores closing. I've forgotten the number, but there are a certain number of malls that close every week now across the US. Auto-oriented retail is was having a tougher time because of the internet and other changes in who we are. It's having a still tougher time now, shifting much more to a virtual platform. However, housing, and again, think of all the demand to come and live in and possibly work in great urban neighborhoods and downtown is turning out to be the principal support for new retail. We're finishing up downtown master plans for places like Memphis and Birmingham and other cities that have economies not that different from Cleveland, actually. And it's very interesting. The single support for retail is the new folks who want to come into urban neighborhoods and bring streets back to life. And again, we then have to be very careful to make sure that these new businesses reflect who you are, the kind of neighborhoods and communities you want, basically honor and tell sort of your stories as a community. So with that as kind of an overview, big picture, the 50,000 foot version of things, let me turn the floor back to my terrific colleagues, Drew and Brett, to talk about the specifics that they're discovering about your neighborhoods.
Thanks, David. That's terrific. And just a quick note, and to piggyback on that, our analysis is really a point in time pre-COVID. The presumption being what had driven activity and interest and turnover and development activity in these neighborhoods prior to COVID will one day come back. We hope one day soon. A lot has changed, as David just kind of discussed. At the same time, a lot remains the same, and some things are accelerating, and no doubt new opportunities are revealing themselves as well. The big picture, and we'll talk about each of these neighborhoods individually, is there is demand. There is demand in each of these neighborhoods. There are interesting, exciting things happening. There are things that are driving development. There are forces that are attracting outside investors and outside developers looking at capturing some of that market strength. If we may, we would categorize those opportunities as ones that are purely market driven, and those opportunities that are happening but require a fair amount of subsidy, a fair amount of identifying those subsidies, organizing those subsidies, and deploying those subsidies into the market to drive that development and to drive that change. So we can advance from here, Craig. We'll start kind of north and work our way south. The first neighborhood cluster being Ohio City and Tremont. And Drew, I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and then talk about this right here.
Thanks, Brett. So we're going to start with talking about a neighborhood that has market-driven development, where the numbers actually work, where developers can make projects work without without large subsidies. They do use the city's tax abatement. I mean, every project is using that, but beyond that, they're able to do much of this work without it. In Ohio City and Tremont have strong markets. Obviously on the residential side, the rents are much more significant, much higher, put it that way, than obviously in Clark Fulton and the other neighborhoods to the south, and that's why these projects tend to work. There's not only strong markets, but some of the institutions and the amenities there are greater. Not that these other neighborhoods don't have things that are very valuable as well. we can talk about challenges as well. There's, as we talked to some of the lenders, we had a difference of different opinions. Some felt like even before COVID, there's a question about whether there was some market saturation, whether the building boom that has gone on in Ohio City, whether it's coming to an end. We talked with other lenders that said, no, we're still doing projects. One of the things we noted, though, is that retail is having is still struggling. I mean, yes, we have restaurants and bars, but other retail is struggling in those neighborhoods. We are also, I just should mention here also, there's the RTA has a significant parcel here right next to the Red Line station, West 25th Street station. And those are some of that's a potential area for real development. And it's one that we're going to be looking at further as we get to our next stage. We're also seeing some development that's occurring in the sort of the border between these areas. And as we start to move towards Clark Fulton with infill projects and the like, and some using historic tax credits and the like. I'm going to pass it back to Brett to talk a little bit about Clark Fulton.
Thanks. Hard to talk or even think about Clark Fulton without thinking about the ambitious projects that MetroHealth is undertaking on their campus there. Not only on their campus, of course, but also across the street in partnership with NRP Group. One project that'll be primarily focused on housing medical residents that work at the campus. Another project that is an affordable housing project with some community space in the ground floor. So those are we hope catalytic projects. No doubt they're dynamic projects. No doubt they are beginning to drive some of that energy outside of the campus into the rest of the neighborhood that just abuts and approaches the campus. It is as terrific as those opportunities are, and we know from speaking with the CDC, with MetroHealth, obviously with NRP Group, the enthusiasm to get them done is tremendous. The challenge to getting them financed, the challenge to identify to qualify and then apply for some of the subsidies, the low-income housing tax credits, the supportive funding from the city, the tremendous ways that MetroHealth has really leaned in to make sure that those projects work and that they're lively places would be a difficult thing to replicate in the private marketplace. So the ability for those projects that are terrific to engender further development in and around the campus and elsewhere in Clark Fulton and Brooklyn Center is a question mark, but a lot of people are looking to the gravity that the new campus will create and these two initial projects will create as hopefully a sign of things to come. Looking outside of the MetroHealth campus, there are opportunities that are meeting the market where it exists, in the sense that it is an area of low area medium of income. The purchasing power for kind of the average resident in the neighborhood is rather low, so that has led to some financeability challenges, some credit challenges, securing loans to purchase these houses. There are some very committed service providers like CHN Partners that has a lease purchase program that purchases houses, invests in them, and then sells them and rents them to low-income residents and writes off the difference of whatever they might lose in what would otherwise be kind of a market transaction. So, and there are here and there purely market-driven, speculative real estate developers looking at purchasing lots, designing a spec house, if not actually delivering it, and waiting for a buyer to be attracted to the market, to the street, to the neighborhood. We can advance from here and talk about Old Brooklyn at the end of the corridor here. Drew, I think I'm passing it back to you.
Okay. So Old Brooklyn is interesting in that it's a neighborhood of primarily single family. Well, all these neighborhoods, a lot of single family homes. The housing stock's in pretty good shape. There are some community amenities there. Some of the challenges we've had, and especially in talking with the CDC, is that there is a lack of density nodes where there's no little downtown there, or there's limited retail, limited space that's available for it. And is there a way to create some more retail? At the same time, we don't have this density. How do we do this? Is there residential, multifamily residential that could be created here as well? And how do you make what kind of subsidies do they need? How do you make this work? Brett, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. I think this is the interactive portion of our time here. So Craig, I'm not sure if there are instructions we need to provide. Thanks.
So you're going to see a poll question pop up. We're going to leave it open for about 2 minutes. What we want you to do, what kinds of retail services? So we talked a little bit about some of the challenges across the thing, but we kind of want to understand too where you feel as a community there may be some elements lacking. So the first question is about retail services. Check it that all apply and where you feel maybe lacking. So the first one is a neighborhood coffee shop or bakery, grocery stores, restaurants or cafes, clothing or goods stores, things that you purchase for your house, or that hardware home goods component. So there's about 2 minutes. I have a suspicion people may click everything, but if there's something missing too, we encourage you to write that in the chat box. Great. We got about half of everybody participating.
It's great. I'll just, to fill in the dead air here, something else we heard, I think that was powerful, at least to me, in the Old Brooklyn neighborhood, was the entrepreneurial spirit of some of their newer residents that are, I think moving in from Clark Fulton and from elsewhere in the city, really wanting to start new entrepreneurial enterprises, cafes, restaurants. Some of the housing stock is challenging from a tenant improvement perspective. They're not to code. They don't have the exhaust equipment to just step in as a turnkey opportunity, but there is a lot of enthusiasm and seemingly a lot of entrepreneurial energy that is getting people excited in Old Brooklyn these days.
Great. Okay, I think we are done. Give me a second here. A little bit of a technology piece. Let me pull this up. Okay, can everybody, let me share results. Here we go. So number one is definitely a grocery store, followed up by sort of neighborhood hardware and home goods, and then clothing or goods stores. So that's really interesting feedback there. But I did notice there weren't a lot of grocery stores in the area, and I think that's an important component, especially if we're trying to help with residential investment, et cetera.
This is David. I'll just jump in for a second. If you look nationally, and this is, I believe, true of Cleveland also, literally half of all retail rents for the last couple of years have been for restaurants or other places serving food, sadly not supermarkets selling food. but those are generally the businesses that folks are most interested in starting and get the most support from nearby housing. Somebody had talked about the desire for some more bodegas. They might, if they can serve some food too, that this might be one way to get them going.
Great. So we're talking about housing options. We have a lot of great existing housing stock, but we wanted to get some ideas from you where you think there may be some of the missing elements. So we have 5 options here. Again, pick the ones that you think are most appropriate. Number 1 is multifamily affordable housing rentals. 2 is single family, that's a sort of detached house ownership opportunities. Mixed family or multifamily mixed income rentals. It would be more market rates apartments, townhomes, and then this little nuance here, which is a live work unit. So that sometimes means sort of an active ground floor office facing the street with a townhome orientation to it as well. I'm just going to launch this poll. We're going to give about a minute or so. It seems that everybody's taking about that kind of time. Great. And note too, some of these questions are going to be popping up again in our detailed survey that we're going to be launching on Monday, and we'll talk a little bit about that in our next steps.
I would also mention across the board, as we discussed with some of the community development corporations, affordable housing was a major theme, and at least they identified as a major need. The challenge there is the limited amount of subsidy available from the state and federal government to support the financing gap. But certainly it was recognized by most, if not all, as a sincere need and desire in almost every community.
All right. Last little bits. Going once, going twice. Okay. Single family affordable home ownership opportunities are the number 1, which I think is sort of hitting our assumptions. You know, there are about 4,000 vacant units across the area, which we see as the single biggest opportunity to increase density and ownership across the belt. So I think that's a key component. Number 2 is multifamily affordable housing rentals. And I think that we're on our way to that, but it does sound like we need additional units, even from what the supply that's being built. Great, we're gonna have one more question underneath this. Again, this is going to be pick as many. We heard a lot on public realm and you know, around the BRT stations, and I think that's important, but we're also hearing a little bit about additional amenities and things that may be lacking in the particular neighborhoods and what may be attractors in the future. So this is really focused on open space. Again, pick as many as you want, and we will open. You have about a minute. We're hearing some of this from the Clark Fulton Together plan as well. I think it's important to look at open space as a number 1 attractor as far as an amenity component, but we want to understand some of the nuances to that. So that's why there's a little bit of difference between, say, a naturalized open space, which is more sort of unprogrammed open fields, or forest type areas, so say a open green space, which would be more of a, say, like a programmed kind of park space. Few more votes in there. Okay, going once, Going twice. All right. Not surprising, number one is street trees. And I think that's something universal we've heard on multiple walks. David Jerka, in your public engagement pieces, was this something that kept coming up?
Yeah, it certainly did. Not just along the 25th corridor, but actually on some of the side streets and residential streets where people are coming from for 25th, like Lakeview Terrace, for example. And I know Diane would reinforce that point. It gets really hot and you're walking uphill with no street trees. It's really a problem.
Something we will definitely want to share with the city. Great. Brett, Drew,
Yep.
do you just want to?
We can wrap up here. Yeah, of course. Thanks, Greg. Next steps, as I think David Jerka laid out in kind of the project timeline, the next steps for this work stream is Drew and I will be with a colleague working on a detailed financing strategy, identifying sources of capital at the local, the state, and the federal level that are specifically organized to support TOD development for these types of purposes. I'll just skip to number 3, Craig, so I'll come back to number 2 for you. And then we will be working on underwriting and putting together some detailed financial plans for some types of development, examples of development along the corridor to demonstrate the financeability, and again, to kind of size and help identify ways to fill that gap with local, state, federal sources of capital that are specifically organized for that purpose. That'll help inform where the opportunities are, and indeed how to go out and make sure that they are financially feasible.
Great, thank you. So just to recap this a little bit too, our market analysis is really looking at, there are 3 sort of distinct geographic areas that have similarities to each other, regardless of neighborhood boundaries. And each one of them, as we move forward into our final piece, are gonna look at some curated financial strategies to help mitigate or address particular geographic issues. Is that correct?
100% as always, Craig.
Great, good. Just like to wrap it up. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about zoning and policy, which is everybody's favorite topic. It's really exciting and engaging. I'm just kidding a little bit, but it is a very important component when we talk about how we build transit-oriented development, in particular along a corridor that is varied as far as geographic and orientation and market capabilities. So our mandate here is to look at the current zoning code and the built form as it exists today, and as it relates to the BRT line, the MetroHealth line, along West 25th, and then provide some initial zoning recommendations. So we did a deep dive on the zoning review, and not to get too into the weeds here, but if you own a parcel along the West 25th corridor, you have to sort of do a 3-step process review to understand the regulations that fit within here. And it comes down to area requirements, the density, parking, et cetera. And for the regular person who owns a parcel, this could be a really daunting task. Even for a developer, it becomes daunting to try to understand all the nuances and nooks and crannies of this piece. But we also wanted to pair that with understanding what currently exists on the corridor, and what would we consider as sort of built form that's contributing to transit-oriented development, and then where are the areas for opportunity, or those non-contributing typologies that may transform over time. Noting that also some of these contributing buildings are transformational opportunities, like these 1-story commercial buildings that exist, say, in Ohio City and Tremont along West 25th. They may intensify over time, but they're not necessarily bad for the character or the walkability of these areas. And the good news is that we're really looking at about 40% areas that need or are opportunities along the corridor. And there's actually a lot of really great typologies that currently exists. The next part of our study was, if people are building in the neighborhood, what and they're applying for an application at City Hall to do a renovation or a new construction. What are the barriers that to get to that point? And the biggest barrier is a variance request. And so we took a 5-year analysis of variances along the corridor. This is elements directly on West 25th, but also in that quarter-mile, 5-minute walk from the corridor itself. And we found 93 zoning variances between 2015 and 2019. 30% of them are new construction. 70% of them are existing buildings that may need a particular renovation. Here in this case, for our existing buildings, a vast majority of them are a change of use and the variance requirement for that. But our second biggest one is parking and garage requirements, and oftentimes it's reducing parking in a particular area, and the amount of review that goes into those reductions is quite large. And so we see sort of our 4 big components for that, which is the use, the additions and alterations to a building, parking, and then the use addition and alteration itself. So what we want to do is create some recommendations that look at what of those elements can we actually take out of the variance structure that are non-detrimental to the overall quality and character of the neighborhood, to free up planners and planning commissioners to look at the broader aspects and really hone in on the quality components that are really important to the community. When it comes to new construction projects, we have 4 major elements as well. We're looking at reducing the overall parking requirements. A lot of the parking requirements, in particular to say retail, are very suburban oriented. And then also changing uses along the corridor. And we're only talking about buildings along West 25th to add more permitted uses within those current zoning pieces. Now we are saying to increase front setbacks. That is where the building orients at the property line, and it has to be set back from that. Currently, there's some setback issues along the corridor, especially in tighter areas where we want to see more generous sidewalks or better pedestrian and public realm. We want to start to create some new setback components that provide a little bit of breathing room in that corridor. And not to get too into this today, but we will have a full zoning analysis report for everybody to read and comment on over time. But we are sort of 3 major components to our zoning recommendations. Now, we know the city is looking at enacting a form-based code over time. What we're really looking at is what can we do in the interim, and what are the elements that are going to be really important for that. So step number 1 is really looking at simplifying the zoning code. This could be even putting everything on one sheet of paper of what is required, or reducing the amount of places that you have to look within the zoning code itself. Number 2 is developing a new transit-oriented development overlay along West 25th. Currently, there are 3 different zoning overlays that address pedestrian walkability and the sort of mixed-use components. We would actually look to replace those with an overlay that looks at streamlining conditional uses, being clear about density, really looking at more performance metrics on that instead of how much square footage. You're looking at more now of how many units per acre, or walkability components within that. And number 3 is providing wiggle room for those setbacks so that we have some clear guidelines to make that work. And that plays into our BRT study as well, to make sure that we have even enough room at station areas and preserving that space. Number 4 is concentrating retail areas. Right now, it sort of expects a 5-mile corridor of ground floor retail. We may want to look at concentrating them at key intersections and focusing the ground floor or uses that really create that walkable vibrancy that we're looking for. And then lastly is getting creative on parking. We want to look at reducing or any overlap of parking requirements that may be required for a particular parcel. Not to say that parking isn't required in this area, but how can we be more efficient with the parking that we do require for these new developments? And then our third piece is considering the infill opportunity. So what we're talking about on the TOD overlay is really about new buildings along West 25th. What we're talking about in the infill piece is really the residential neighborhoods that are within that quarter-mile walk. That includes things like focusing the code on built forms and typologies first, so that we're getting the right kinds of typologies and we're clear with developers on those expectations. Number two is embracing more than just one typology. Currently, the two-family zoning really is formulatic in the piece of either it's sort of a duplex two-family home or a single-family detached home, but maybe townhomes or live work or those types of things may fit within that context too. And then just like we're doing on the TOD overlay, we want to get creative on parking. How can we help facilitate off-street parking in unique and different ways? And we're talking to the city about those recommendations as well. Our next steps for this are going to be publishing our detailed analysis and then working on final recommendations so that the city has an action plan moving forward to work with city officials to update or streamline per our recommendations within that. So I hope that wasn't too jargon heavy, but I'm happy to explain anything if anybody has any questions concerning the zoning review that we've done so far. Everybody's excited about that piece. We're going to talk a little bit about our BRT study here too. So the third component to our work is understanding some of the contextual needs for station planning and also the built form around those stations and the spatial requirements that are required. We have sort of a four-step process with this. We're identifying key issues with the bus rapid transit line itself, and that's more of an operational thing, which Ralph will talk about in a second. Number two is we're doing a deep dive on station contexts and existing conditions. So we're developing sort of baseline station typologies, the spatial requirements around that, and then inserting those at a very high level at each preliminary identified station to understand the existing conditions and that things that may be required for that. And then lastly, we're going to develop proposed recommendations. That will be our final report component, which will happen in January, which will detail all that sort of issue to resolution and next steps in there. Tonight, you are going to start to see a few of these things. I just want to remind everybody, our mandate is not to do a final design of the bus rapid transit, but to start to get an understanding from the community as far as the style and character and the quality components. So our first public engagement session, we asked you about what amenities you would like. That's feeding into our process for station concept and placement. Tonight, we're gonna get into sort of a style question. What style approach are you looking for? So with that, Ralph, I want to talk a little bit about some of the key issues concerning the BRT alignment and TOD.
Sure, and really what we want to start with is understanding the current operations and where we can significantly improve them so that when the whole corridor is redone, you've got a service that works for the folks in the neighborhood. You heard a lot, as David talked earlier, in the initial outreach, there were some very specific concerns that people had about operations, and we tried to put some numbers and make that a little real. So what you're seeing here is the kind of northbound travel time, right? The buses have a GPS on them. You know, it's got two time points, which we're showing at E and D here. So you're heading north, and north is to the right. And what we really want to look at here is that the boxes that I highlighted. So Google says you can drive this in 7 minutes. If you look between, in the morning hours and the AM peak, the gray bar says that GCRTA schedules the 51. It should take 10 minutes to go from E to D, right, during that time period. If you look at the teal, what you see is that the 50th percentile, the average trip, if you look at hundreds of trips during several months, the average trip actually takes longer than the scheduled time. Right, so that alone is frustrating, and I think that that's the lived experience of many folks in the corridor, is that it takes longer than you want it to, it takes longer than you expect it to, it takes longer than GCRTA expects it to. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what we're showing in yellow. So if you take that same number of trips and you look at the 90th percentile, right, which is not the worst trip ever, but it's kind of your typical bad trip. This happens often enough that you notice it. That typical bad trip takes almost 20 minutes, right? It's 18 and a half minutes. And right there is the kind of thing that frustrates transit riders. It's the thing that makes you say, I can't rely on the service. It's the thing that says, I missed my connection. I couldn't pick up my daughter at school. I showed up late for work, because that happens, and it happens often enough that you have to build that into your schedule. And that becomes really challenging. And that's really related to not anything that GCRTA is doing. It's related to the physical environment of the corridor. And that's something we can significantly improve, I think, through this effort, and certainly through the implementation of the BRT system. So Craig, you can go to the next slide. Right, and we've kind of taken some of that information and looked at the previous work, and we're working very closely with the whole team and the station area plans in the city to identify places where we can put in dedicated transit facilities. Some kind of a lane that is primarily for bus, primarily and nearly exclusively for buses, because those are the things that improve the reliability. There's less friction, there's less cars moving in and out, it's easier to get in and out of the stops. Each of those things, excuse me, are going to make transit operations not just faster, but consistently faster, right? So that you can count on it, so that it works in a way that you can rely on it on an everyday basis. And to do that in conjunction with all the other things that we're talking about as part of this process. And I think the next slide just has some pictures of, this is a project that we worked on. I'm based in Boston, here in Everett, a community just north of Boston, where we put in these peak hour dedicated bus lanes, so that, and we marked them in red, and you see there's still parking there. So it's only sometimes during the peak of the peak, when, the buses are most heavily used in the peak direction. And then that space can revert back to travel, to, for bicycles, for parking, for whatever the use needs to be. And you can see sort of how that's done. And what we've been able to do is show a really marked improvement, not just in travel time, but in reliability by implementing this kind of thing. So we're going to keep looking at this, and Craig will talk about this in the station designs and some of the next steps we're going to take over from here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ralph. We are looking at sort of now the BRT stations themselves, and I just sort of want to highlight to everybody, these were the identified station areas that were given to our team at the beginning. I think what's important is we're using these as a foundational understanding of the physical realm in the areas, but as we start to dive into this, there's been some questions about, should the station be, 2 blocks over, 3 blocks over? For us right now, we're sort of staying the course, and we're identifying these as the primary stations. And what you're going to see in our report is that every single one of these stations, we have sort of 4 pages of detail that look at the existing conditions, and then we've identified sort of a schematic diagram that shows a proposed insertion of a potential BRT station. All of that will be published on Monday, and it'll be part of our sort of public surveying component. So be on the lookout for that. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end of our meeting. When we talk a little bit about BRT look and feel, Cleveland is no stranger to a BRT system. I think the uniqueness of this is being in an urban corridor and trying to use sort of the public realm within that. Instead of using particular station architecture like the Euclid Health Line has done, we're wanting to use some more typical stations, but maybe instead we use things like a pylon, these graphic signage pieces within the corridor that help identify those stations and create some brand identity within it. So our approach is really looking at, making it easy to find the stations and create this a unique experience, but then looking also at how does it all come together. So we really want to make these comfortable. We want to make it easy for people to connect to them. We've heard from some initial feedback that Currently, sometimes even walking to the stations is difficult. So we'll be looking at recommendations within that. But what we've heard loud and clear is that for all stations, we're going to try to provide a shelter, a bench, bike racks, trash receptacles, and system maps. Now the add-ons, and maybe we flip a couple of these into the all station piece, particularly street trees, would be a key component, but understanding that there may be some room requirement for things like bike sharing, identifying opportunities for public art, and additional pedestrian lighting within that system. So this is sort of where we're starting as far as approaching the design and the schematic layout of these, so we understand the spatial requirements. We then have sort of developed 3 design ideas and the approach in which we want to put forward. Design idea number 1 is this idea of timeless urban. We want to look at a shelter that maybe has the more traditional form, but it's very transparent and lets the urban fabric sort of come throughout it. We see this as an opportunity for light aesthetic within the public realm, but being able to focus on community character. So the art pieces and the pylons themselves would be that component. We've gone a totally different direction where we're saying, you know what, maybe the shelter is something that we want to have pop out of the landscape. We have a lot of heritage buildings in the area, and by doing something very contemporary would really create a unique brand. So maybe this is one that we look at a shelter design that has a unique shape, that it contrasts with that masonry and brick of the corridor, which is a built character theme, and then helps really put in your face the BRT brand identity itself. So we call that sort of future contemporary. Names are to be approved later. Design idea 3 is what we call sort of urban industrial. We see, looking at the corridor, we see a lot of that brick and masonry, the really great sort of old commercial buildings, these few industrial kinds of buildings. And we thought of this as sort of a middle ground where maybe the shelter itself has a little bit more of an industrial look and feel to it, but we lighten it up with that understory of wood in the canopy that on a cold winter day, you see this in a lot of Scandinavian, and we're even seeing that here in Canada, that understory of wood. This is a British Columbia Transit in Kelowna. That has installed this, but instead of the metal screens, we would look at more of a glass enclosure within that, so it creates a very unique and different feel to it. So that's sort of our 3 initial ideas, and we want to, and I'll go back through them one more time. Timeless urban, a little bit more traditional, but sort of blends into the landscape. Future contemporary, a little bit more in your face, and creates a unique brand identity. Urban industrial, which really kind of speaks to the historical character along the corridor, but provides a warm look with that wooden under roof in the winter. And with that, we're going to do a little bit of an interaction time. Really want to gauge, first reactions to this. Which one, and you can only pick one. Which one do you feel is more interesting to you, or you want to see a little bit more detailed on? And we're going to launch that poll. We're going to give you about a minute. Very interesting. Got about 30 seconds to go. Okay, 10 seconds. Last call. All right. So, looks like half of everybody picked timeless urban. But the urban industrial kind of spoke out to a few people too. So I think that's really interesting. We're going to create more sort of a story around these three ideas, and this will be used as part of our engagement tool for the next round of online surveying as well. So just to wrap up the BRT piece, our next steps are looking at promoting and preserving opportunities for dedicated bus facilities along the corridor. We want to integrate the transit and ridership information into the station area plans. I think what's important for this is not just to understand today, but where we want to go and where these stations may grow over time. We're doing a curbside parking review and an analysis at key locations right now, and that will feed into our last mile connectivity and curbside management recommendations in our final report. And then we're identifying some critical areas for priority transit interventions that will be key to the next step of the BRT design itself. So just to summarize, I'm not going to read all of these. You've heard sort of all of these tonight. Just wanted to pull them up again. I think the most important one is the public engagement. We really sort of scratched the surface tonight just to give you a highlight of some of our initial thoughts. But on October 19th, we're going to launch a more detailed survey with some of this data that you guys can review over time. I really want to thank everybody from the last round of surveying. Getting that much participation is really important, especially as we're all sort of navigating this COVID environment. David Jerka and his team are going to continue mobile walking tours and in-person events. And then sometime in January, we're going to have our final engagement session to sort of wrap up all of these recommendations into a detailed report. It's not our final time we're going to talk to you, noting that this is more of an action plan moving forward. And there's going to be a lot more work over the next year or two as we look at BRT implementation. I want to thank everybody for your time tonight. Please note too that we do have a Spanish version of this presentation online. If there are any questions, we have a comment here from Jesse on public art into the shelter, maybe custom designs and the perforations. Absolutely. I think those are things that we're going to be looking for moving forward. Do want to open it up. We have a few minutes left for tonight, but if anybody has any questions, want us to go back to anything that you may have seen, want to open the floor.
I only have one question, and I know you touched a little bit about this, kind of like in the beginning from some of the surveys and things like that, but it's a question that comes up to me a lot from the community, and it's like, why is it that the buses take, why is the length between buses is so long?
Oh, you mean like the time between bus
Yeah,
service?
the time, yeah, between buses, like, you know, why does it take so long? So like you were saying earlier, you were saying like about how, you know, people are going to have to kind of put in their schedule time, like if they miss the bus, because they'll miss an appointment, they'll be late to work, or taking their kids to school, or be like, forget I missed the bus, so I'm not going to be able to stop at the grocery store, so now I'll figure out
being able to hop on, hop off.
Yeah,
those
because that's
times.
a question. Yeah, that's a question that, to be honest, like in every time I've spoken about this project, when people have had questions to ask me about, that would be probably like the number one thing that I get bombarded with, and I don't really know the answer to that.
Mary Beth, do you want to give some highlights on? Sorry, it's more of an operational question with the RTA. I don't know if we can get too into the weeds on that tonight, but do you have any insights?
Unmute. Oh, there's a lot of reasons. Think about when you're driving your car, all the reasons why you get delayed. You get delayed because you're behind a mail truck. You get delayed because there's a hole in the road. Somebody's turning left. For RTA, we have all those things. Plus, we have passengers that are getting on and out. We have a rain delay sometimes. There's all sorts of reasons why our buses take a long time. That's just average travel, but down the Metro line, remember, it goes into 3 different branches. So like I wanted to go on the 51B or the MetroHealth Line B, and I missed it. I saw it go, you know, how the horrible feeling when you see it take off and you're not on it. And, you know, the 51 comes every like 15 minutes, but A comes, B comes, C comes. So like me, I saw B go down. I had to wait another 40 minutes before the one that took me where I wanted to be. That is also part of the schedule. We have expanded the time. We call it headways between buses. And, you know, we need to fix that right now. So I hope I answered some of your question.
Ralph,
I guess somewhat.
Sorry, I can add to that a little bit. Ralph, again, I talked about this in the reliability, and not to get too complex on bus operations, but there's 2 different things, right, that I think you're referring to. One is just the schedule, right? How often is the bus supposed to come, right? And if it's supposed to come every 15 minutes, then you may wish that it came more often, but at least that should be something that you can rely on and count on, is that happens. But the reality, which we observed in the quarter, and that's what I presented on, is that even if it's supposed to come every 15 minutes, sometimes it gets delayed for a variety of reasons, and Mary Beth was talking about some of them. And that means that even though it's supposed to come every 15 minutes, sometimes it comes in 10, and sometimes it comes in 20, and sometimes it comes in 25. And that is exactly the thing that frustrates folks. And often the best thing you can do about that is to make the physical improvements on the corridor so that buses don't encounter that same level of friction, and, you know, they're not stuck in traffic. They don't have to worry about pulling in and out. They're not stuck at behind the mail truck or the garbage or any of those things. And that often requires that physical intervention where you're giving the bus its own lane, or you're excluding as many other users from that lane as possible. And that means that if it's supposed to come every 15 minutes, at least it'll come every 15 minutes, not sometimes 10 and sometimes 30, right? So that's the piece that we can really affect. And then once it's running more regularly, then it's often easier to establish and to add frequency to it, right? So that it can then come more often because the operations just are that much smoother. Does that answer make sense?
Were you talking to me?
I suppose.
Anyone.
You know, anybody else can also agree. I guess.
I mean, it's like I said, some of it.
I would suggest this, Sonia. I'm just going by your name here. I think as you talk to people in the community, what I would urge is that that's the partial answer to the concern that you hear is, you know, if folks want the bus to operate better, then you need to allow the accommodation on the street in order for the bus to operate better, right? Like that's, to me, that's the connection I think you want to be able to draw, right? You give it its own lane, it's going to come more often and at the same time, right? And that may mean that traffic goes a little slower. That's okay, because the trade-off is the bus is running that much better, right? That's exactly the way you want to think about it.
Another question that, am I muted? No. Another question that has come to me, and I would say that's something as somebody that works in the community that I have experienced a lot as I help residents out is sometimes whether they're having an issue with a bus ticket or an issue just trying to be able to speak with someone. And that was something that they said, like, it would be something that they would like to see in the bus stops, like, you know, aside from knowing you know, digitally where they can, you know, kind of like on the airport, like when the next bus is coming, that kind of thing, is being able to get a hold of someone from the RTA. Because that's something that I have experienced when I've residents have come and they're having an issue with a ticket, or they're trying to get a hold of the RTA because of a situation, and like there's nobody you can get a hold of. Like you cannot talk to somebody.
That's a good suggestion. I mean, we used to have booth attendants, we used to have people at all our stations. We don't anymore. And you can't ask the operator, he's busy or she's busy. So, you know, if we, right now, you could talk to the police or a dispatcher, but you can't talk to somebody who said, why? You know, my fare card won't work, what do I do? So that's a great suggestion. We really need to figure out customer service on the street, and we are making strides to increase our public service and our service to our customers. I know a customer called me, and I called our guy about a smart card, about his phone app, and I called the guy in IT that did it, and he said, he told me to call the manufacturer. I'm like, I can't tell a customer to call, you know, someplace and I don't know where about one app that won't work. But yeah, we're working on it, and we hear you.
And I don't mean to bombard a lot of all these questions and like sound like it's something like very negative. I'm just bringing questions that I hear in the community, and they have come to me. Another question is why they don't make it more available, a way to be able to buy tickets. Like, you know, maybe like look in the community, what are like some of the either grocery stores or like pharmacies, like places that stay open that maybe they are able to buy an RTA ticket. Sometimes you have people that maybe they don't take the RTA all the time, but then all of a sudden now their car don't work, they're not able to get a ride, you know, they want to get to work, and so like, okay, now I need to purchase get a ticket right away. So it's like, where can you get one? You know, and it's like, I don't know, you know, there's no, like, when I've had that question, I've been like, you know what, I really don't know. Call the RTA, because I have no clue where can you purchase a ticket like that, something like that, like spontaneously. So I think that as moving forward, and it's going to be something that is going to, you know, it's they're developing within the Clark Fulton area and 25th, and they're looking to do all these new developments and better the RTA. I think that would be something good to be able to. I think that it would also encourage people to ride the RTA. Some people won't. They would like to, but they won't, just because they see all those barriers that
Yes,
at the end
absolutely.
they end up saying, I'll just take the car. But really, they much rather take the RTA. But they're really tiny areas, but barriers, but
she works at least 6 days.
yeah, but it's the fact that, you know, that
it's
they,
death by a thousand little things, right? Like
yeah,
it's just little tiny things. And then I think the important component to transit-oriented development is first understanding the transit piece of that. And so these are really important conversations to have as they build up the BRT piece. And I highly encourage people, as we do our surveys, maybe we'll build in some components that ask questions about, you know, what are some of your barriers to actually writing the line, just so that we understand that and we can at least have it documented as part of this process.
For you, the staff.
Is that fair?
Just now, she just left and you just came.
We do have a few. We do have a few questions on the chat component or comments. Danny had a comment here concerning retail areas. The comment in particular is that it seems walkability, if we narrow or concentrate the retail areas, that it would decrease the walkability component along the area. I think what we're trying to do in the zoning code in particular, and I'm sorry if I didn't articulate that, is where are the most viable retail components along the corridor, and extrapolate from there, say a 5 or 10 minute walk radius. And then the uses between those zones would be supporting walkability, but maybe they're more like office entries or less active type of ground floor uses that may be supporting the overall system. But a good note, and we'll keep that in mind as we move forward with our recommendations. Lord, you had a question here about a jury and the art communication. That's a good comment. I think we'll put that in our recommendation moving forward for the art in transit program. And then Robert, you had a question here. Glad to hear more about dedicated all-day bus lanes. How much more time could be regained by implementing BRT elements like all-door boarding and level platforms? Good question. I'm suspecting, and Ralph and Mary Beth, you may be able to chime in for this. Do not know at this time, but may be a consideration moving forward. Is that fair?
Yeah, I can jump in quickly. And again, there's two factors that are important. One is, yes, all-door boarding, level platforms generally save some time because you minimize the number of people that have to all go through the one door, that have to fish for their change or their tickets or any of those things. So all those things speed it up. For those, you're often talking seconds, but those seconds times every stop add up along the corridor. The other part that those things really help with is the reliability, because just as I show where that difference between your regular trip and your kind of worst trip comes in, it can be because of any of those factors. And it could be because of traffic, it could be because somebody's challenged getting on the service, it takes them longer to pay, you got to deploy the ramp, any of those things all add time, and they add up. The more of those you remove, it's not that you're saving time, it's that the trip gets more consistent. So you won't save time on every trip, but every once in a while you'll save 3 minutes. That feels like a ton. So yes, they're important factors, but they can be hard to quantify.
Question here, knowing that West 25th Street is the main corridor, are there any plans, possibilities to create corridors to help people get to from the RTA and the neighborhoods? The short answer is yes. We are looking at the main corridors that run east-west from this and the connectivity recommendations for that. The benefit of the communities along West 25th is they are a gridded network. So what we want to look at is at particular station areas, providing recommendations to improve that cross connectivity piece. And Ralph, if I said anything incorrect, please let me know. Just shake your head.
No, that was great.
Okay, good. We do have some just general comments here. Ride RTA does have a section that lists places that sell bus passes. But I think it would be it's a great comment of how can you expand that possibility, and we'll make sure the RTA understands that. There's a comment here about transit police and using some of that money, but I think that's more of an operational comment, but thank you for your comment as well. We did schedule this until 8 o'clock, but I think we had some really good conversation here. It was a little bit of a smaller group this time. If you felt like this information was useful to anybody, we are going to publish the recording of this meeting and the presentations on our website at 25connects.com or 25connecta.com in Espanol. Are there any last thoughts, questions, concerns? Mary Beth, do you want to?
Sure, I want to wait. Yeah, let me get me unmuted. Hold on. Em? Okay.
Yep.
I want to thank everybody for their attention. Thank you for attending. Thank you for being there, for writing at RTA, to being a supporter of us, Sonia, we'll work with you. We know that customer service is sometimes hard. I knew that the fair media places were somewhere on our website, but where it will take probably about 10 clicks to get to it. But we're working hard to improve our customer service. Our customers are really our lifeline. This will be a great project. All of your input right now will go back to designing the best bus system for the entire community and making West 25th Pearl connect us all and do it fast and efficiently, and hopefully spur some development as well. Thank you again. Until next time. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Dot.
Thank you very much. Everybody have a good night. Stay safe.
Bye.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.